Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Idahoan Show. A while back, my wife and I decided to try waxing cheese. This is a method of preserving cheese by coating it in wax, so that, in theory at least, it should be shelf-stable for an extended period of time. Now, if you look online, you can find thousands of tutorials on how to wax cheese, and they all cover the process of coating the cheese with wax, and then they set it on their shelf, and that's the end of the video or the end of the tutorial, and they never come back and show you what it looks like or what it tastes like after, 3, 6, 12 months, etc. So, what we thought we would do is do a few batches of waxed cheese ourselves, and after it had been aging for different periods of time, again, 3, 6, 12, 18 months, then we would make a video showing how we waxed the cheese and then the results of these different batches at different ages or stages of preservation. Well, we got to the 6th month mark and it didn't preserve the cheese as well as we'd hoped. So we kind of aborted our experiment, and we're probably not going to follow through on making the rest of the tutorial, but I did want to show you the taste testing footage of this 6-month-old waxed cheese. And don't worry, I actually filmed this a couple weeks ago, so you can rest assured that I did not die from eating moldy cheese. But without further ado, here's the original taste testing footage. Okay, it's been 6 months since our first attempt at waxing cheese, so let's get out the cheese and see what it looks like. Now, the first thing I notice is that there is some moisture on this. I'm not sure if that's just condensation or if that's moisture from the cheese that was somehow leaking out or seeping through the wax. So I'm going to just wipe that off. Now, this block, I notice there are some small holes in the wax covering. I'm surprised we didn't notice that when we were waxing them. You'd think we would have caught that, so it's possible that somehow these holes appeared while it was in storage, that somehow the wax dissolved, or perhaps there was a bubble that later burst and created a hole. But I'm not sure what those holes will do to the preservative properties of the wax. Ooh, this doesn't look good. This one, there's clearly some mold on the wax here. Now, it's kind of along a single vein, so I'm not sure if there was a crack in the wax where the mold spores were able to get in and cause spoilage, but that definitely doesn't bode well, at least for this block. I think one thing we would definitely do differently next time is to store these on an open shelf where condensation won't collect. We had them stacked inside of a plastic bread bag. Initially our thought was that that would just provide an additional layer of protection from dust and whatever else, but with all the moisture that collected on these, I'm thinking that that may have just created an environment where condensation could collect, and they probably would have been better off on an open shelf where that could have more readily dried out. Now, if we cut into one of these, I do see some moisture underneath the wax as well. The cheese was definitely sweating a bit. So now I'm thinking that probably a lot of that moisture was just the cheese sweating through the wax or through small pores in the wax. The cheese does smell just a little bit aged, I guess I'd say. Okay, I'm not sure if this was Colby Jack or mozzarella. It's clearly a white cheese. Either way, it tastes a little different than it would if it were fresh. It tastes more like sharp cheddar now, but it is still edible in some fashion. The texture's a little bit different too. It's a little bit less chewy, a little bit drier. Again, more reminiscent of a sharp, dry cheddar. Okay, this would have been either a mild or a medium cheddar when we put it away. And I'm noticing it now has holes in it, kind of like Swiss cheese. It also appears to have shrunk somewhat inside of the wax coating, and I see more of this liquid seeping out. Doesn't have much of a smell at all. Okay. It actually tastes a little bit like Swiss cheese now. You know how Swiss cheese has kind of that almost hint of sweetness to it? That's what I'm getting out of this now. Except, if anything, more pronounced than the Swiss cheese that you typically find in grocery stores. Yeah, I'd say, assuming that this was mild cheddar to begin with, I'd say it's slightly sharper and noticeably sweeter. Again, more reminiscent of Swiss cheese than cheddar. It doesn't necessarily taste bad, though. Okay, this one I'm pretty sure was mozzarella. And once again, we're seeing voids, bubbles like Swiss cheese. It also looks to me like the shape of the block has changed, like it sort of swelled up, which I guess makes sense if there's something that is producing gas to create those voids. Yeah, that now tastes just about exactly like Swiss cheese that you'd buy in a grocery store. Not much flavor, a little bit drier than like a mozzarella or a cheddar, and kind of that just faint hint of sweetness. Now let's cut into this one that has the holes in it. I'm pretty sure that this, as well as our other one of this shape, is Monterey Jack. Looks like it might be a little bit more dried out around the corners. But other than that, it doesn't look much different. It doesn't taste much different either. Yeah, sort of a medium sharp, dry cheddar-ish flavor. And finally, let's cut into this block of mozzarella that has the seam of mold here. Okay, you can see the mold in the cheese there, but it doesn't look like it really propagated very far through the block. Yeah, it's only on the surface there, or at least only close to the surface. So, cut a piece that's well away from the seam of mold. Let's see how it tastes. And yeah, just like the other one, it tastes like a kind of a strong, sweet Swiss. Maybe with a hint of like goat cheese or something, something that has kind of that sweetness to it. Now, to serve as a control group, when we wax this cheese, we also set aside a few identical blocks of cheese in its original packaging. So, I've got here some Monterey Jack. There's some sort of deposit on the outside of the packaging. I'm not sure what that dripped from or seeped from. But other than that, this block doesn't look really any different than it probably would on a grocery store shelf. And it doesn't taste too much different either. It's definitely sharper. It has that sweetness to it, just like the Monterey Jack that we stored in wax. If anything, I would say that the texture hasn't changed as much. It doesn't seem to have dried out as much. Now, that could be just because we had the holes in the wax, or the wax layer may not have been as impervious to moisture as we thought. But I'm not seeing a lot of difference. Now, the cheddar and the mozzarella, on the other hand, have clearly swelled up. There's something in there producing gas. I guess that shows us that the original packaging is airtight. Now, I think just about everybody tells you that you shouldn't eat food that has obvious signs of spoilage like this, but let's at least cut these open and see what they look like. Yeah, this does smell a little spoiled. If I found this like this in my refrigerator, I would probably just throw it out. Just like the stuff we aged in the wax, it does have these holes in it. And again, if anything, the texture seems more like the mozzarella originally would have been. I don't think we lost as much moisture with the plastic packaging as we did with the wax. I know I said I probably shouldn't eat this, but we'll take a bite for science. Yeah, sharp, sweet, and bitter. A lot like the stuff that we stored in the wax, but more so. And finally, looking at the cheddar, this actually doesn't have much of a smell to it, and it doesn't look like it has holes in it like the cheddar that we preserved in wax does. Now, it does have some little cracks in it. Maybe the original block had enough cracks that the gas was all able to escape. This one actually seems to have changed the least over the 6 months that we've had it in storage. As we can see from the original packaging, this was a mild cheddar, and now it's more like a medium sharp cheddar. But it's really not as bad as I would expect for basically just taking a block of cheese and sticking it on the shelf. So I think that there's a few tentative conclusions that we can draw from this. First off, when we initially started waxing cheese, our hope was that it would give us a way to preserve it in stasis indefinitely. So, we buy the cheese from the grocery store, we coat it with wax, we store it in the root cellar, and then months or even years later we can pull it out and it'll be exactly like it was when we first bought it. Well, that is clearly not the case. Even once it's coated with wax, the cheese continues to age and change, and so when you pull it out, it's not going to be the same as when you put it in. Now, is it necessarily a problem that the flavor of the cheese changes as it ages? I guess that depends on your sense of taste. Certainly, it's not like the flavor got so bad that the cheese was inedible. I wouldn't even necessarily say that the aged cheese tasted worse than it did before it was aged. But it did taste different enough that I might use it differently in cooking or, in how I'm eating it. Now, my other tentative conclusion is that there wasn't much difference between the cheese that was waxed versus the cheese that we stored in its original plastic packaging. It doesn't seem like the wax has any special magical preservative properties that cause the cheese to age more slowly or prevent it from spoiling any more than the plastic packaging that the cheese comes in. Now, like I said, that is a tentative conclusion because admittedly our waxing job was not perfect. You could argue that if we hadn't had the holes or the pores or other defects in our wax coating, that maybe the results would have been different. I don't know. And as a final caveat, I should probably point out that as of right now, I feel fine. But if I did get some kind of food poisoning from sampling that cheese, it would probably take at least a few hours for the symptoms to show up. So I will wait at least a week before I edit this video and proceed with posting it on the internet. And if I suffer any ill effects or come up with anything that I need to add to my observations here, I will insert that at the end of this video. In any case, thank you for watching The Idahoan Show.